Welcome back to Let's Talk Tuesday. This is the podcast where we have real conversations about learning, leadership, and what it truly takes to help people and organizations grow. Each week, we bring together different perspectives, experiences, and voices to explore what learning development really means, why it matters, and how we can do it better. Today we have a very special guest, Lucy Butters from Glasgow, Scotland, who has over 30 years of experience in learning and development, international relations, and more recently, cultural intelligence. Welcome, Lucy.
Delighted to be here, Amanda.
I'm so excited to dig in with you. Tell us a bit about your background and what your current focus is today.
Thank you. And I was thinking about this and my background and how I got into learning and development. And recently, I've got triplet sons who are now 20 and at different universities in Scotland. And one was home recently and saying, Mum, I used to really resent that you didn't buy me the branded football boots, for example, and he's like, but now that he's at university and managing money, he's like, but I now realize we went places, we did things. You're really supporting me at university. I'm beginning to see where money was spent. And I think I look back at my parents, and I'm one of five siblings. There wasn't a lot of cash. Having wasn't so important, but doing and learning. My parents would get behind us, music, sport, society, anything that, and my mum used to say, can do is easily carried. And I think it makes perfect sense to me in some ways that I'm in this learning and development space in different ways, ranging from being in research and teaching posts in universities through to having my own company today. And it started my company looking to support the people side of working internationally. And then someone asked me, the Leadership Foundation for Higher Education in the UK, they asked me to design a course in cultural intelligence for leaders here. I had never heard of cultural intelligence. Having my own business, I thought, yeah, I've got to say yes to this. And it just took me in a different direction. And that's really my focus today. I'm now one of 10 master facilitators globally in the field of cultural intelligence. I've written a book, convened insights from experts around the world in cultural intelligence and practice. And I just love the work with people.
Well, you know I love people, and everyone listening knows I'm a people person, but we have a very eclectic group. So there's going to be people on this that are listening going, What is cultural intelligence? What is it in a nutshell?"
In a nutshell, it is the capability to work well with difference. And we've probably all heard of emotional intelligence, one of the multifaceted, and cultural intelligence. So it's got four capabilities: your drive, your motivation to even want to work with others, your knowledge about how people are similar and different, your metacognition, how you think about that, and then, of course, your ability to adapt, your adaptability in actions.
Yeah, and I think in today's world where we're so much more connected that it doesn't matter, in the past it was these are the people in my town, these are the people I have access to, these are the options I have. And now it's so opened up, the world is so opened up to us that it's more important than ever. And not even just, yes, the aspect of working, like I've worked with people in so many different countries over the years. So you have that, but also within the culture, like this is our culture in this division or in this department, or this person comes from a different background or different, how do I talk to this person when we're both speaking English, but maybe not understanding and meaning the same thing. So that is so important. And it's such a fun topic and a quick throwback, which ages me, but I remember when EQ, when emotional intelligence was like the new like fancy thing.
Absolutely.
And now it's just like, oh, everybody knows emotional intelligence. Now let's move on to cultural intelligence. So I love it. Love it so much. Thank you so much for sharing. So in that lens of starting and learning development, being action seeking and behavior doing, what does learning and development mean in your world?
I had many words that came to me because, of course, learning and development is so important. It means lots of different things, but the word that came out first or top that when you asked that was opportunity.
Mm,
And for me, thinking about two different stages in my life. So I graduated in the early 1990s, and we talked about aging ourselves. There I go, right in with it. And it was a time when I did my first degree in history, and it was a time when really there weren't a lot of work for people from humanities. And jokes in university were things along the lines of what do you say to a humanities graduate? Big mac and chips, please. That kind of apparently funny humour,
yeah.
but that, and the truth was, I had never touched computers. And then you couldn't get a job without computing skills. So there's a lot of similarities with what's happening with young people at the moment. And I wanted to keep learning. I went back to university. It took me 2 years to save, doing bar work to save to be able to go back and study. And I knew I could do history. So I did history and computing. And I came out of that Master of Philosophy able to understand how to construct databases, analyze data, how to use it. And it opened up totally different opportunities for me. And then when in 2010 I was setting up my own business, I asked lots of people that they would have a coffee for me with me and just talk about, who had set up their own training or coaching businesses and what had worked for them, what they wish they'd done differently, what advice they'd give to someone setting out. And I remember someone saying, keep investing in your own learning and development. And I remember thinking, I need to get money in. I'm not, my learning and development is not going to be my focus. And yet that was the best advice because every time I have, it's led to new and widened opportunities.
I love that so much on so many different levels. And I think you're right. I think, we talk about this a lot, but I've never heard it spoken about like that, about what it really boils down to is opportunity, because it's not just the fact that you're learning new skill sets, or you're even literally, if you're in a certification program, you're meeting other people and that opens up different worlds and different opportunities.
Yes.
But everything that you learn, every new skill that you acquire, every time you don't know something and you learn how to learn something, you are building your value to your customers, clients, people in your life, because you're realizing, oh, if I don't know something, I can go figure it out, or I can figure out who I have to go talk to, or what certificate, or what course, or what am I going to do to advance. And then that builds your self efficacy of, I believe that I can learn. I believe I can do more. And then that's infectious. And that's the thing I love about learning development personally, is that you see this in corporate America, you see this in small town, small businesses. When you even have just one person, it doesn't even have to be the leader, but if you have one person on your team or at your client going through something and they're excited about it, they talk about it. And then it's like a bystander effect. It spreads, right? It's like, oh, this person's learning something interesting. I want to learn something, maybe the same topic or maybe even different topic, but if they can do it, I can do it. So it's just, there's so much benefit. And I tell people this, not just investing in yourself, because by investing in yourself, you're able to help more people. You're able to add more value. Yes, directly, but also the indirect of showing them that this is important. The continuous improvement is important for everyone, and everyone is capable of it.
Absolutely. And I think in some ways there's echoes of what I was saying about my family life, about how do we create cultures that are learning
Hmm.
cultures.
Hmm.
What do we say? What do we do? How do we value it? And the people who, and you can learn in different ways. It's not all about training and development
Right.
programs. read a book, we can listen to podcasts. There's
Exactly.
lots of ways for always developing ourselves and our organizations.
Yeah, I love that. Why is learning development so important, especially in today's world?
I'll think about this in two different ways. One is the individual, but they're both linked to the fact that there's so much change, so much disruption, so much we just don't know what's going to be happening tomorrow going on. And recently I was in a conversation with someone who says, I've given over 20 years to this organization. It stood for nothing when the redundancies were coming up. And they were like, and I've not invested in my training and development. And now I'm at this space where I'm not sure what to do next. So I think even when you feel very secure, it's backing yourself. That bit about just keep investing time, effort, energy. It doesn't need to be money, whatever way. But also organizationally, they're in that same VUCA world, that volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous. We need skills that we can navigate that. And cultural intelligence, when we think about the word culture, it's such a complex word. There's so much packed into it, so much difference, and you never really get to know the organizational culture fully with all the subcultures that go on. So for me, it's about navigating complexity. And I think we need the skills to be able to navigate complexity.
Yeah, I have 2 degrees in psychology, and so I know humans hate change, and in the world we live in, it's constant change, and humans' brains, neuroscience, we don't like complexity. We have a really hard time figuring out what the next step is when there's too much thrown at us. If there's too many options, people can't decide. If there's too much complexity, people do nothing. And so when you're talking, it was so interesting what you were saying, but this phrase came to me that I heard many times ago. And you have these like platitude posters that people say, and one of them is, a bird doesn't, I'm going to butcher this, but it's something like a bird doesn't rely on the branch, a bird relies on their wings, right? So if a branch breaks, the bird just flies with their wings, right? And first time I ever heard that expression, I said, well, but I don't have wings. So if my branch breaks, but I don't have wings, right? And I think what the goal of what they're trying to say is that the belief in that you can figure out how to handle a branch breaking that you're standing on in that moment is not going to be a bird has wings, they can use their wings. What can you use? And I
Yeah.
think that is such a critical thing. Like you talked about the gentleman who had 20 years and the redundancies were coming, and he's like, I didn't invest in me. What I hear when he says this, hearsay through you, is his insecurity in his ability to prove his value. And so that's just another leg of it, like an underlying thing of what you said is the value, the belief in yourself that you can figure it out, that you can add value is reinforced or not based off of how you, and I talk about this a little bit, but like you design your life. Like a lot of people let life happen to them, like they get laid off or they get a job or they get, instead of the action of like what you talk about, what's the effort that you did? What's the action you did? What can you do today? And I do talk about this a lot, is to even move yourself like one step forward, but so that because each step you'll build your own confidence, and it becomes a reinforcing cycle.
Yes, and I would say, lots of people are in difficult spaces and they were contributing to their organization. They weren't thinking about themselves. They were very organizational focused.
Hmm.
And so they maybe did development that the organization requested of them. So I would say yes, and I just think it's a more varied and maybe more complex picture. And as you say, we don't really like change. Some people love it. It's kind of,
Hmm.
they kind of talk about, the disruption and people wanting to do that. and other people want to be safe and work from people like Daniel Kahneman, for example. His work on how we think and make decisions, although it's complex, when we get develop muscles for thinking about that, we get better at it.
Yes.
So
It's a
it's like
muscle.
learning to
Yeah.
drive.
Yep.
It's kind of like it's so tense the first time and it uses so much energy. But over time, you develop habits and behaviors and muscles that stop being so difficult to use. So
Yeah.
I think that's a really hopeful message in the element of change that's going on.
It's so true. It's so, so true. What do you wish companies knew or did differently as it relates to learning and development?
I have, over the past couple of years, interviewed people around the world who are experts in cultural intelligence for developing leadership, for supporting inclusion, all these international effectiveness, great interviews. And I would ask each person what they found hard to develop around cultural intelligence. And that action piece was half, more than half of the people interviewed. And I think there's a comfort zone for if we know something, then we'll be fine. Doing business with generation, whatever, this kind of give me a bit of information and then I'll know. And that's a comfort zone. But actually, the discomfort and becoming comfortable with discomfort is such an important element of behavior change. And that's the area that I'm in, it's behavior change. And so I think lots of companies, what they want is just they think that's me, I've ticked it, we've got the knowledge.
Mhm.
But there's something I've heard you talk with other guests that you've had on about we don't want the one and done kind of element.
Mhm.
It doesn't change behavior.
Yeah.
So there's something about what change do you want to see? Lots of people come with what training they want, but actually it's what change do they want to see, and then what work back from there as to what interventions would be useful, what support, what coaching, peer coaching, all these different things that actually makes change, positive change, possible.
Right. And stick, right? And
Yeah.
it's a little bit of a tangent, but one of the things I was thinking about as you said that as well, and it's a little bit of a tangent, but it's not just the organization wanting the person to change or the person wanting the person to change or the environment and the culture that supports that change, but it's also, a lot of times it's the why and it's how are we pulling it through that enables people to change. And I think that it's just so if the missing word here is the intention, right? The intention, because I think people feel that whether it's if it's I'm an individual and I want to change this because, and I have my strong why, or it's an organization we're changing this. It's not a, you've probably heard me say, it's not a light switch you just turn on, and people are people and they need certain, ways of being before they can actually adjust to the change. And it's how you evaluate, like, did it stick, did it work, and was it effective, but I love what you said about you have to first look at that and we call it reverse engineer how you're going to get there, because that makes a huge difference. We've covered a lot of ground and I've had so much fun talking about cultural intelligence with you. One thing, as you can hear, I love that you grew up with this. You grew up with action bias, which I what I call action bias. But what's one actionable tip that you can leave us with today that can make our tomorrow better?
One of the things I've really been thinking about is listening and, that power skill of listening. And interestingly, it's not in the assessment and development language of cultural intelligence. There's thousands of paper, over 1,000 academic reviewed articles in the world about this topic. And it's not specific in terms of how it's assessed. So I've become really focused. I think we as trainers, how we listen impacts on our presence and our influence and our connection in the spaces and with the people we are with. So, one of the things I think culture really impacts who we listen to, when we listen, how we interpret what we hear. And so, one of my challenges, if you like, the action is to spend a day or two just observing yourself. Who are you listening to? When do you get agitated or frustrated when you're listening to somebody? And this could be with your children or your parents as much as in the workplace, but just observe, because that then leads into that awareness piece about where your rubs are. Where could you spend your energy differently? Because listening takes energy. So that would be one of my top tips. And I'm also just going to say, seek out cultural intelligence and practice and get insights from the dozen people who helped contribute to the book, the interviews that they gave. So yeah, that would be my two things.
I love it. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. This was such a fun conversation. I know the audience is going to get a lot from it.
I've enjoyed speaking with you, Amanda. Thank you.
Thank you. And with that, we'll begin to wrap up. So I hope this discussion gave our audience a few new perspectives, sparked some ideas, and left you with at least one takeaway you can put into action immediately. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and join us every Tuesday as we continue exploring learning, leadership, and what it takes to help people and organizations grow. And if today's conversation resonated with you, or if you'd like to join me for a future episode, I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and let's talk again on Tuesday. Thanks, everyone.